the Upshot, Ultiworld Disc Golf's podcast about the latest in the disc golf world. I am the editor, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me again is Josh Mansfield. We've been apart for so long, Josh. I don't know how to deal with it. I've lost my weekly rhythm of the Upshot with you. How are you?
I'm well. You started giving the intro, and I was like, this sounds familiar. I think I've heard this. It's weird, though.
Well, thanks for holding it down. Great show with Andrew
Likewise.
Fish.
Thank you. Andrew's a great guest. It was really good.
Yeah, awesome. So look. Let me just go right here, right now. We could do a whole show about the NFL playoffs. How good was the divisional round playoffs this weekend?
It is, without a doubt, in my opinion, the best weekend of football in the history of the NFL.
Wow.
Like, I think you can make arguments. I think you can make arguments that are probably better. There are some better games. There are some really exciting games that I think you can easily dispute deserve to be ahead of these games. But all four of them in regulation being decided by a field goal, except for the one that sends that to overtime, that was in the most dramatic fashion of them all. I don't name a better weekend. Name a better four set of games than these four.
It was outrageous. And it looked like that Rams-Bucks game was just going to be just a blowout, boring.
Uh-huh.
And I just kept saying, the Rams have choke in their DNA, okay? How do I know the 49ers are going to stomp the life out of them again next week for the third time this season? Because they just choke every time. Email me, Rams fans. I want to hear it. Tell me how you think this team is going to win. They call their stadium Levi's South because there's so many 49ers fans that show up to the games. They tried to not sell tickets to anybody outside of LA.
Yes.
Oh my God, these guys are clowns. So the 49ers go into Lambeau and beat the Packers for the only time all season. And not only that, they hold Aaron Rodgers to 10 points. And in his playoff career, he has never scored fewer than 20 points in a playoff game, Josh.
Yep.
And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that the 49ers played a great offensive game. Oh, no.
The offense didn't score.
It scored, but
no, special teams did.
Very little scoring.
Because two field goals.
Well, yes.
Special teams unit.
Well, the field goals were coming. One of them was off a turnover, right? Were they both off turnovers?
I don't know if they both were, but at the very least, special teams units are the ones who were on the field when points were scored.
That is fair. I see what you're saying. The actual
Jimmy G
offense
did not get you any points.
The actual offense did not score. Yeah. It was not our finest moment on offense. We just had the most untimely penalties possible. But you know what? It doesn't matter how you get a win on the road in the playoffs. And Robbie Gould, good as gold, goes out there, bangs home the field goal like he does every time. And my heart is still pounding from this game. Like, I'm still in recovery, and I know I'm going to have to go through it all again next week. It's the most stressful team to watch in the history of the NFL, but I've got them 16-1 to win the conference championship on a bet I placed, a couple months ago at this point, and I don't even think I'm going to hedge. That's how confident I am.
How much is your bet going to pay out if you win that?
Well, I only put $10 on it. I'm like I'm not like staking my whole big bets out there. But so 160 for me. That's
I would say, but if you put $100, that's size. Yeah, okay. But I would say that's still nice return.
It's gonna be. I'm so confident. I feel great, and it's just as long as Jimmy's healthy enough. That's really where we're at. But I mean, just overall, all the games, regardless of whether you're a fan of one of the teams, I feel like the only people who can really just be super bitter are Bills fans, because that is such a painful way to lose, especially when there were just some big mistakes in that final stretch of the game where, first of all, they should have clearly kicked the kickoff short so that you force the Chiefs to have to run it back and burn some time. And then their defense made absolutely no sense on the two plays before the field goal. None. Made no sense. They had their safeties like 50 yards deep. What are they doing? I just thought they mismanaged that, but still, to lose the coin toss and lose that way and not get a chance to have the ball in overtime. I mean, understandably, people are upset today about the overtime rules, which clearly need to change.
Well, and I think just from an entertainment value, it sucks that you have the most amazing entertainment, excitement packed weekend, and you get into a game that is ranking, or people are arguing, are top 5 best NFL games in the history of the NFL, and for it to end with the Chiefs just winning the coin toss and getting to drive it down. I think that this becomes a clear call to the NFL why it's important to change those rules, because that game could have been a shootout. I mean, I wanted 7 overtimes followed by a field goal contest.
What about a legend? A field goal contest. Imagine that. You move 5 yards back, 5 yards back.
Because that's how college does it, right? I think it's like 7 OTs and then they move to field goals.
I actually forget now, but they had a game that went to like all the OTs this season. Yeah. Because both teams were so horrible they couldn't score. It was some Big Ten game. But anyway, wow, what a weekend. And the NFL is just the best sports product on television. And sometime I want to do a show where it's like, what can disc golf learn from other sports? We're not going to do it today, but let's put it on our minds and let's write it down. And like, how can disc golf, whether it be from the way the sport is presented or the way the rules are set up or whatever, what can we take from other successful professional sports to make disc golf better? Because there's definitely things to learn from the NFL, particularly in the way that they present the game on television, which they do a masterful job of making it feel like you're constantly watching action, even though there's more downtime than play time. Yeah.
Yep. It's pretty exciting. Do you want to talk disc golf then?
Well, I was thinking we would just do NFL the whole time, but if you insist.
I worried we'd lose subscribers if we did that,
though. So, yes, let's get to a little bit of quick news. So we have an announcement. Katrina Allen, we have an announcement about a forthcoming announcement. Katrina Allen coming out on social media and saying that she will be making her announcement about her new sponsor on Wednesday. So that's tomorrow. We will find out, finally, after this, what feels like 6-week-long wait. I think it's only more like a month, where Katrina Allen will land after leaving Prodigy. Sounds like the deal has been done, and they've just waited to announce it. And maybe we will find out why they waited to announce it. At some point, people are going to start talking about this. So, Josh, you want to make a prediction? Where do you think she's going?
I'm going to say Discmania.
Discmania. Wow, that'd be spicy.
Discmania. I think that the pairing, I mean, obviously a very strong MPO field, some young talent on the FPO field, but to get an established name would be, I think, really valuable for their brand. So Discmania is my pick.
Somebody on social media, or maybe in the Upshot at ultiworld.com inbox, said that Vibram, aka Vibram, coming back with a big splash. That no one has been talking about that. I'm going to go with the rumor that has been most persistent, which is DGA. That has been most persistent. And it's a really interesting, and like, there was the Drew Gibson tweet where he was like, you're never going to guess. DGA feels like one that you're never going to guess.
That's true.
Because they haven't made a big time signing like that. Of course, they've got a little bit going on. Andrew Marweed signing earlier this season. And so that's what I'm going to go with. No inside info here. Just it's been a pretty tight ship, but that has been out there for some time. Where that started, I don't know, but that's going to be my guess.
I mean, here's what I'll say. If you want to talk about return on investment, DGA will be the easiest to track. I mean, they will go from a brand that I don't feel like sells a significant number of discs relative to some of the larger manufacturers. And I think you will see exponential jump if you sign Katrina Allen. So
we'll see.
You may think it's weird for a smaller company to sign, but they probably would profit the most.
I mean, it's not so often that you get a chance as a non-big. How many? What would you going to call the big four? How many are the big? You got Innova, you got Discraft.
Yeah.
Do we want to loop Trilogy into one bucket? That's three.
Probably. Yeah.
I don't know if MVP gets there. Does Discmania get there? Borderline. So let's call those big five.
Okay.
That's fair, right? MVP has
maybe
entered that conversation thanks to James Conrad.
Thanks to James Conrad's shot.
Outside of that group, who's going to get the chance to sign a multi-time world champion? I mean, if in fact it is one of these smaller companies, or really outside of the big, the top two even, that would be surprising. And I would have to include Prodigy in that group, right? I feel like Prodigy goes in there before Discmania and before MVP.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So maybe I'd say it's big four.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see who versus MVP and Discmania, who's got the most sales.
Anecdotally, I would say it feels like Discmania. They certainly have bigger, higher profile stars.
Sure.
And have for a longer period of time.
The MVP has a really strong retailer and dealer list, though.
And they've grown an unbelievable amount in like the last 2 years.
Yes, they have. So interesting.
So
send us numbers if you want to be included in the big five. Send us your numbers.
Yeah, we got to do the industry report. There's a little data out there here and there. In my Cashline newsletter that goes out to subscribers, I wrote about some of the data around PPP loans and what that was able to tell us about payroll, which of course is a proxy for the size of the company and sales, et cetera. But It's a little tricky because some of these companies don't manufacture their own discs. And so then that's like a little different. So like, Dynamic, for example, they don't manufacture their own discs. So they have a smaller group of people who's actually like running that company compared to the companies that do their own manufacturing. So anyway, Player of the Year awards announced from Ultiworld Disc Golf. So we now have all of the major Player of the Year awards announced, and your Players of the Year are, as voted by Ultiworld Disc Golf staff, Ricky Wysocki and Paige Pierce. And other players getting votes, on the MPO side, just Paul Macbeth. On the FPO side, Missy Gannon and Katrina Allen. So Paige Pierce becomes the third player in FPO to win a Player of the Year award, along with Missy Gannon winning the Disc Golf Pro Tour Player of the Year award, and Katrina Allen winning the PDGA Player of the Year award. So, of course, I've talked in the podcast about why I thought Paige should win. She ultimately did win. And Ricky ends up sweeping all three awards. So your thoughts, Josh, on the decision for Ricky and Paige taking it down?
When we did a by the numbers of who should win Player of the Year, you and I had the most dispute, I think, or at least the most question about the MPO side. I mean, do we include the majors or do we not include the majors? How do we, if we drop top at the highest and lowest finishes, what happens to the numbers then? I mean, we're running them through all sorts of data and looking at the different ways we could tweak it. And, every time it would end up being someone different because Eagle had, a crazy number of wins, and Paul did really well at the majors, but Ricky was just super consistent. And so, we were looking at MPO and we're like, there's so many ways you can cut MPO and get a different answer. And then we went to FPO and we're like, this shouldn't be hard. Like, I don't feel like there's a question here.
And yet FPO ends up being the one with the most discrepancies.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting.
Yes.
Of course, part of that's the way that it's calculated.
Right, 100%, because Missy's includes a fan and media vote, so 50% of it is just based on recency bias. Katrina Allen
calling out the media. I voted for Paige.
Yeah. So, and then you got Katrina Allen, who's rewarded for playing the most events, the A tiers and the national tour events, and then Paige from Ultiworld staff that I feel like is the most representative of performance on the tour.
But it's also the most subjective decision.
It is the most subjective decision. So in my opinion, the subjective decision was right. That's
my subjective opinion, our subjective opinion was
right.
Correct. I will say this. In a year in which we had more majors, had Paul Macbeth had the same season, but added, let's say, one more major win or like finished second and Ricky didn't win it. Ricky finished 7th and Paul finished 2nd. At some point, I do think the majors begin to outweigh. I just think that in this year, it wasn't enough to overcome Ricky's consistency and, more wins on tour. Mm-hmm. If Paul had won Worlds, maybe we have a different conversation because he sweeps Worlds and USDGC. It's hard not to give the person who does that Player of the Year, but he got sniped by another announcement, the Shot of the Year. Based on the votes from Ultiworld Disc Golf readers, James Conrad's throw in from 247. Am I still remembering the feet right?
That sounds right.
Of course, wins Shot of the Year, but it only got 71% of the vote. Does that surprise you?
No. And the only reason it doesn't surprise me is because there were 4 entries and finalists. So, you're assuming each of the other 3 got 10% of the vote. How many votes were there? Do you know?
I don't know that number off the top of my head.
Okay. So, but let's say you have, regardless, I guess my point is you have fans of people who watch the other shots, who are fans of those players.
Sure.
If you watch
friends
Gavin
and
Rathbun's
family.
Ace, exactly. If you were there at Gavin Rathbun's Ace, but you weren't at Worlds, you were like, oh, but I saw that one. Like, I'm totally voting for this one. That was such a cool moment. If it was James' shot versus another and it was 70-30, I'd be a little more shocked. But with each of the others getting 10% of the vote, I think that's still a pretty clean sweep for James.
If you poll, like people in the United States, like, do, Yetis and aliens actually control the world? 90% no, 10% yes. Yeah. There's still 10% that say yes. And whether they're joking or whatever, who knows? But, obviously, James Conrad's shot win. But the other shots deserve some credit because they were awesome. They won their respective categories. James Conrad's shot won the air shot category, and then of course won the Shot of the Year. But Paul Macbeth's putt on 17 in the final round of USDGC, ultra clutch, OB behind, gigantic gallery, huge fist pump, like total confidence, and just buries it, and needed the putt,
and the UDisc mess that was going on.
Oh my gosh. That was very chaotic at the end of USDGC because then the DGN stream got broken and people were losing their minds.
I forgot about that.
And then you had you mentioned Gavin Rathbun's ace at the Vintage Open. Sweet shot, won Ace of the Year. And then the final one was Matty O's roller at the Preserve, where he was totally out of position and throws this massive Annie roller that goes all the way right to the basket inside the circle. And it's just how is that even possible? I don't think I don't honestly, I would never, ever, no matter how many times I tried, be able to throw that shot. So credit to them for getting to the finals. But I think we all knew what was going to happen at the end of the day.
It was unquestionable.
Last little thing here before we get to some mailbag. The All-Star format was discussed actually right here on the Upshot for the first time. Jeff Spring talking about it in the interview that I did with him last Thursday. The format for this year's All-Star event, which will include a draft. So the top 2 players by DGPT finish that attend the event will be the captains, and they will do a snake draft, kind of like what you see in the NBA All-Star game where they draft the teams. And then the players will compete in different categories in order to earn points for their team and a chance to win a cash prize. There will be best shot doubles in a stroke play format, where each team puts 2 players in and they go head to head. And then you have stroke play singles, where each pairing, you can score a point in each, kind of like Ryder Cup. And then in 3 skills categories, putting, accuracy, and distance. And each team will put 2 people into each of those categories. So, Josh, this is a big departure from what they did last year, where they kind of did a doubles, singles, hybrid, and you scored points, but it was an individual champion. This year, it's going to be a team-based competition. What do you think about it?
I think it's excellent. It is very different. It's very fresh. And I talked a tiny bit about this with Andrew Fish, but the All-Stars event is entertainment. That Disc Golf Network, the Disc Golf Pro Tour, is in the entertainment industry. And this event, I think, really lives up, or it's going to live up to that standard of being something that's entertaining, that attracts people. And that when you think about it, this is something I would show my friends that are not interested in disc golf. This is an easy introduction, an easy access point, because I could pull up the skills competition and I can say, watch Eagle McMahon and see how far he throws, right? This is insane. You've got to watch this. And
I know the answer to this question, but do you put Eagle in distance or putting?
You put him in distance.
I know the answer, but he's such a good putter. I feel like it just takes away from one of his other really good skills. But yes, obviously you put him in distance.
Yeah, you're definitely right. Because you could find another putter who might win, but no one's touching Eagle.
Right.
This is entertainment. I'm really excited for it. The one drawback I see is that there is a lack of potential in terms of what the players are going to receive. Now, I don't know what the cash prize is. I don't think that's been announced yet. I've been watching the Twitter of
it has not been announced.
Their website. Yeah, we don't have the cash prize and how much they're going to earn. I know they get $1,000 for just showing up, and so that's already not bad. But when you are the Disc Golf Pro Tour All-Star Champion, that's something that is easily marketable. Kona, with her dynamic disc signing, they used that and were easily able to market Kona as the Disc Golf All-Star Champion. That's hard when it's a team event.
Yep.
It loses some of its value then for your sponsors. And if you don't have a significant enough cash prize, I think you're going to see the top players choose not to attend. We are seeing Paul and Ricky not attending. I think, and maybe they wouldn't attend regardless of the format, but I don't think that the format compels top players to come to this event without the necessary cash and publicity sponsorship.
It would just get so expensive to put enough money out there that players would be like, yes. Like if Paul's starting his season at the Memorial in March, so he's skipping Las Vegas Challenge. So for him to show up and have to go across the country to go to this event, I mean, how much do you have to put into the pot for him to want to go?
And then you got to match that pot with 12 other players.
Right.
Six
So
MPO,
are you going to give
FPO.
everybody 10 grand if they win? I mean, that just seems, it's just not feasible at this time. I get your point. The other thing I will say, though, no one cares who wins the All-Star game. No one cares who wins the All-Star event. Sure, we can say the Kona thing. It was a good talking point because she went on to win an Elite Series event.
Correct.
And it was like the foreshadowing of her playing really well in the 2021 season. But nobody actually cares who wins the All-Star event. So having it be a team, I think that's fine. Like, yes, maybe at the margin there's some value there, but I don't think people really look at this as something that actually counts. I certainly don't.
And I agree with you as well. But it does. It's interesting. It's interesting to see how it's going to interact with players and how much they want to come to this.
How brutal will it be to be picked last? Somebody's going to pick last. They talk about this in the NBA All-Star Draft. It's going to be tough.
That is going to be tough.
It's going to be tough.
I didn't even think about that.
Well, we are going to do a mock draft here on the Upshot as soon as we have the lineups. So we will hopefully have those by next week. But whenever we get them, we're going to do our mock draft. We're going to each be a captain, and we're going to select our teams. We're going to fill into the spot of each captain on the respective teams. And so, we'll have a little fun with that, and we'll see who we pick last, and if that ends up matching what the pros do. There's a lot of weird stuff going on there. Like, you don't want to pick your friend last, right? So you got to manage that, but you want to win. And you got to think about the categories and who's going to pair well up in doubles and all that. There's a lot of things to process, so we will see. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we got a little mailbag to open up. It's been a couple of months, so we've got some good mail to get to. Stay with us. It's the Upshot. The Upshot is presented by Pound Disc Golf, makers of the best bags in the sport. Now,
you know I like a smaller bag. I carry a pound toolbox around the course, but I am getting a little tired of lugging the bag and having to carry it in my hand. Well, good news, small bag lovers, because I have it on good authority that the Rufus, the new smaller bag from Pound, is coming soon. So keep your eyes peeled to Pound Disc Golf's social media to see when you'll be able to get your hands on the new Rufus. I know I will have one. PoundDiscGolf.com.
Welcome back to the Upshot. It is time to open up a little mail. You can always get to us, upshot@ultiworld.com. And we really do read every single email that comes in. We respond to many, though not all. And we appreciate hearing from you anytime. And it's just always great to get your thoughts on our segments, or if you have segment ideas for us, or you just want to tell us why we were wrong. Quick mulligan. I said Linus Carlson signed with Latitude 64. It's Linus Carlson, so I apologize for mispronouncing the name. We're going to get used to the Europeans being back over here. There's a lot of folks coming over for Las Vegas Challenge. More on that in an upcoming show. So, into the mail we go. Josh, I'll let you have the honors.
All right. First one is a hot take. Greg asks us, or I guess his hot take, is that Valerie Mondahano is going to outperform her better compensated teammate Kona Panis. Thoughts, Charlie?
It's a good hot take.
It's a really good hot take.
I think Valerie has shown at times the higher ceiling, but so much for me is contingent on Kona's putting. Because if Kona picks up the putter, then she's certainly the better player than Valerie Mondahano right now. But that inconsistency with putting has been a real problem in her game. I'm going to say not yet, but I think it could happen. So I'm going to say Kona Panis has the better 2021 season.
I'm going to agree with you.
2022.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. I think the change of scenery, she's talking about it. She's talking about her putt. She's talking about her confidence. I'm inclined to believe her. I think she's got it this season.
All right. On we go to Frank, of course. We got multiples from Frank always. Here's Frank's. Disc golf is the only sport where a failure to score is blamed on the scoring device. So in this case, the basket. You don't hear ball golfers complain the cup was at fault if a putt rims out. You don't hear basketball players say the rim was faulty. You don't hear baseball players say the fence was too far, etc. So, let me give you my thoughts on this. You have a point, Frank. The issue is there is not a standardized, accepted, single basket on tour. And so when we're going to continue to use all of these different baskets, all of which have various strengths and weaknesses, then people are going to complain when they play on a basket that is clearly inferior to some other baskets, which I think is true. Some are worse. And I can understand that when you throw a dead center putt and it spits straight back out at you, that's pretty annoying. If we were playing on a unified basket where it was well known that there was a weakness if you put it too high and it tends to spit out, and then you put it too high and you can complain all you want, but we all know that it spits out when you go too high. I guess you could argue that pros should know the baskets. They should be aware of the strengths and weaknesses of each basket, and they should adjust accordingly. I think that's fair. But I think that every other sport is very standardized. Baseball's outfields are different. And you know what, though? People do complain. Players complained about playing at AT&T. What is it? It's not called that anymore. Oracle Park now in San Francisco? Yeah. Because the field, the walls were so far away and you couldn't hit home runs. And players were getting frustrated and they would voice their complaints because they'd be like, well, that was a home run in literally every other park, but it was a fly out in San Francisco. So I think there is a little bit of complaining, but again, I think if we standardize baskets in some way, then that line of complaints goes away.
That's exactly my thoughts. If you played on 9-foot, 10-foot, and 11-foot baskets with varying hoop sizes, I guarantee you'd have basketball players complaining about one of those rim sizes or heights. So,
And when they change the ball, sometimes people complain. World Cup a few years back, maybe a decade ago at this point, they had some new ball, and like everybody hated it because it was not what they were used to. And that's, I think, what happens with some of these baskets on tour.
I know it's not feasible right now, but I think that that should be a priority of the Pro Tour, are identifying just ideal baskets, or at least minimum standards, right? In order to be on the Pro Tour, you must have one of these 5 models. I think even that would make a huge difference.
Yeah. I mean, there's just a lot of money pressure.
Oh, there is.
I think it needs to get sorted out, though. I would like to see them go to a model where they basically sign a basket for a couple, like a multi-year season deal, and we say this is the official basket of the Pro Tour, and that's what they use, because this is what every other sport does, right? The NBA has an official basketball. I actually think they changed it recently, but you can change it when the contract's up. But again, I think we're maybe just not quite there yet, because all of these manufacturers want to have their baskets on their courses, on their tournaments.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right. Next mailbag. This one comes from Dinko. Dinko has 2 of them. I'll start with the first one. This goes back to Juliana as Rookie of the Year. Provides, I think, some really good insight. He says, I feel like she deserved it and don't see a problem. She'd not played a Disc Golf Pro Tour in the past, and this was her first season, so she was a rookie to Disc Golf Pro Tour. As an example, we can look into NBA Rookie of the Year awarded to Luka Doncic, who won it after already winning the EuroLeague title with Real Madrid, or further back when Tony Kukoc, thank you. I figured I was pronouncing it wrong, but I'm not familiar. Was considered a rookie and selected an All-American second team after already winning Olympic Games silver medal twice, European national teams gold twice, 3 EuroLeague club titles, and several national championships. I think that is a great example, great analogy, and furthers the point that
I guess I feel like it's a little different when the Disc Golf Pro Tour is sort of like de facto becoming the standard professional tour of now, and like now it literally is. And Juliana had already been on the standard professional tour that existed back 10, 20 years ago. So I don't know. It feels a little bit different to me because like Doncic is a good example. Doncic comes over, he becomes an NBA player, he wins Rookie of the Year in the NBA, but like everyone understands that. Like, yes, he's been playing basketball at a high level over in Europe, but now he's in the NBA. If we had multiple competing Pro Tour thing, like if Juliana had been the best player in Europe and then had come over and started playing in the Pro Tour and won, I don't know, it just feels a little bit different to me. But I get the point. It's actually a very good point.
I guess the point I would make in response is that the Disc Golf Pro Tour is, I think, such a higher quality of tour as the de facto standard of disc golf that I see your point. I think I still like. You
see the distinction, like NBA versus other basketball.
I really do. And at the very least, it's the Disc Golf Pro Tour's making money by endorsing their private, their Rookie of the Year for their private company. So good for them.
Good for them. What's Dinko's second point?
So his second point is talking about calling the rules. So here's what he says. Pretty much everyone discussing the rules, podcasts, media, etc., always talks about how players are not calling 30-second time violations, 3-minute search for disc, foot faults, etc., and they should start doing it. Or they talk about officials on the course who would make calls. We've talked about rule marshals before.
Many times.
Many times. My take on this problem is the fact that Rule 812, courtesy, says a player must watch the other members of the group throw in order to ensure rules compliance and help find discs. And I suppose that means a player must call any violations to the rules that occurred. My solution would be not to use officials to call rule violations, but for players and officials to start calling courtesy violation on players who do not call rule violations. One example would be if you're waiting on a tee and a group in front of you is on the fairway searching for a disc for way over 3 minutes, you go over there and give all members of that group a courtesy warning for not starting a timer and calling 3 minutes. I would expect that after that happens once, those players would not allow for it to happen again. If official would give courtesy violation to anyone on, let's say, Nico's card, I would expect they'd start calling it on him for the rest of the round, as they would not want to get a seconded courtesy violation and a 1 penalty stroke. I know that sounds a little bit harsh, but I guess this would be enforced after a few tournaments where players would get courtesy violation calls for not calling rule violations. They would just start calling out rule violations, and calling on, let's say, Nico would become a new normal. I love that. Let's say Nico twice.
Like, if I'm just going to come up with a player at random, how about Nico? Okay, how about this? I got an idea. Courtesy violations for not calling courtesy violation for not calling the rule infractions. How many inception layers can we go?
You had to do it to Dinko, didn't you?
This is meta. Courtesy violations for not... Well, so look, there's a good point at the base of this, which is that players don't pay attention to what's going on the card. They don't watch. Then no one knows what happened. And then we don't know whether it went over the Mando or under the Mando. Let's say Paige Pierce, right? Like misses the Mando. Let's say. And so you have... Let's
say Nico takes longer than 30 seconds.
So someone takes too long to putt. Like, I don't know, Gannon So I want this problem to be solved too, but I really, honest to God, don't see how you get there without third-party officiation of some kind. I just don't. Because the thing is, it's not that players don't see these things happening or see that there's like a time violation but they don't want to rock the boat. If you're on Nico's card, you don't want to call him out for taking too long, because then he's going to maybe be mad at you and then bring a bunch of negative energy, and then you don't want that. So players are choosing not to make these calls because they don't feel like they're the ones who should have to be the sticklers of the rule book. And I get that. They're on tour together all the time. The solution is obvious. It is third-party officiation. It simply is. I don't know how long it's going to take for us to get there, but the problem with this, the idea that Dinko has, is the same exact problem that already exists, which is that players don't want to call violations on other pros.
And as much as I hate to say it, I worry that under Dinko's model, it actually becomes even less likely that you call, because not only are you not calling Nico for a 30-second time violation, but you're calling Kevin Jones because he didn't call Nico, and Kevin Jones being an incredibly likable figure in the sport. So, I mean, then you even have another barrier. I agree. I think that it has to be third-party officials. It has to be people who are seen as impartial, who are seen as not having a stake in the game, and who don't have to get in a van to ride with them to the next tournament.
So last one, this one comes from Dan. Dan is a lawyer. And Dan says, Ricky said in his press conference that he can't talk about his contract, his now former contract with Innova. To me, this suggests two possible situations. One, Ricky just left Innova and breached his contract, and there's an ongoing legal dispute with Innova behind the scenes that has not yet been resolved and theoretically could result in a lawsuit, and Ricky's lawyer wisely told him not to talk about it publicly. Two, the more likely option is that Ricky and or DD already resolved the Innova contract issue and signed a settlement agreement that has some sort of NDA or confidentiality or non-disparagement clause in it. I can't imagine that Ricky and DD would have moved forward without resolving the legal uncertainty around the Innova contract. Although I also couldn't believe when Jeremy Rusko said in an interview that DD and Latitude 64 do business with each other on a handshake agreement, and there was no written contract when Paige left DD. So who knows? As a general matter, there are a couple dynamics at play when ending a disc golf contract early. Generally, the manufacturer is going to have the upper hand legally. They could force the player to complete the contract, prevent the player from going to a new company, or even sue the player for the difference in the value of the increased salary. A company could even sue the new manufacturer for inducing the player to breach the contract. On the other hand, a manufacturer does not want an unhappy player representing it and does not want to sue a player given that the bad PR that would entail, and players know that, which gives players some negotiating leverage. After all, a contract is only as binding as your ability and willingness to enforce it. At the end of the day, ending a contract early is going to be a negotiation based not just on the law and contract terms, but also on the public image of the manufacturer and player. Sometimes a company might let a player walk. Other times the new company might have to buy them out. Even when contracts someday inevitably all have buyout clauses, that buyout number will just be the opening salvo in a back and forth negotiation. Assuming Ricky and Didi settled with Innova, I have no idea what was paid, but Didi would be crazy not to pony up in the ballpark of $100,000 to buy out Ricky's contract, given what they are paying him. So, great insight from Dan. I am not a lawyer, but that all sounds very accurate to what I think is the situation right now. Jeremy Rusko, in our first Upshot interview series on Wednesdays 2 weeks ago, said that basically there was still some kind of ongoing discussion between Ricky and Innova. Now, we have no idea what that is. Nobody's talking about it, obviously. So who knows? But I agree. I do think that what Dan says is right. Paying Innova to buy out the contract, that's a small chunk of money in what's overall being paid to Ricky Wysocki over 4 years.
I think it also adds a little bit of leverage because, Dan is 100% right when he says keeping an unhappy player is going to be nothing but bad PR. Could you imagine if Innova sued Ricky? The Disc Golf Humor Facebook page and the Disc Golf subreddit and Twitter would be nothing but Innova memes. Like that would be it. Innova would be laughed at if they were to sue Ricky because the popularity is very quickly growing to be in the favor of players more so than manufacturers. And so given that that's the case, I think he's right when he says players had the ability and the power just to kind of walk out. But when you have a written binding contract with a clearly defined buyout clause, I think it becomes really easy to say that if a player or another manufacturer isn't going to pay that buyout clause and, they don't let Ricky leave, for example, because Didi refuses to play the buyout clause, I think Innova has a real marketing tool in order to save face when they talk about the way Didi tried to steal them. We tried to negotiate terms with them. Right. And then this
is what it said in the contract.
Mm-hmm.
We knew what was going to happen.
We negotiated it down even, right? Like it would be really easy then for Innova to come back and say, we know Ricky wanted to go. We're not letting him though because Didi refuses to come to the table and negotiate like adults. Of course, I'm not saying that's what happened, but I think explicit contracts at least give that kind of company protection from the negative PR that could come from the enforcement of these clauses in other manners. And I think buyout clauses are just the best mechanism moving forward as to how these contracts are going to be built.
Because, right now the companies could probably do something similar. Innova could say, well, look, Ricky signed this deal. He committed to this time. This is what we said we were going to do and pay him. And we did all of the things in our contract that we said we were going to do. And he wants to leave. So we're going to go to court and battle over it because we feel that, we should be compensated for the fact that he's breaching the contract. That would be totally within their legal boundaries to do it. I agree with what you said and what Dan said, which is that it's very unlikely to happen because of the potential blowback. But the difference there is if you don't have a buyout clause in there, if you don't have something that says this is what happens if you leave early, then you're put in a position where you have to say, well, he signed this thing and this is what he said. But, Ricky says, well, look, you're massively underpaying me relative to my value. I have to do what's right for me. And you're not willing to renegotiate my contract to be fair. And so then, Innova or any hypothetical company in this situation is put in a bad spot because they're trying to say, well, no, you have to be underpaid because that's what you agreed to. And it's tough. It's a balance. It's a balance because you're right. Players do have the upper hand, but I also think people understand that this is business and that there's not unlimited things that players can do and that people are just going to be like, yes, I'm always siding with the player over the manufacturer, because I do think that there's probably stuff going on where, players are breaking contracts. They're definitely breaking contracts and they're basically able to get away with it because the contract language wasn't good enough or because there were, opt-out clauses or who knows, but they are leaving before they said they were going to. And that's from the manufacturer standpoint, obviously got to be very frustrating, but interesting insight there and appreciate the email from Dan. So that is going to do it for today's show. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back with you Thursday. And of course, don't miss our brand new interview series on Wednesdays. We'll be talking with Paul Macbeth tomorrow. So, first time we've had him on the show in some time. So looking forward to chatting with Paul. For Josh Mansfield, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying so long, and we'll talk to you on Thursday right here on The Upshot.